Turmeric is one of the most versatile crops with diverse uses in the kitchen as well as many health benefits. Even more exciting is the fact that it is very easy to grow in the ground as well as in containers, so anyone can grow their own. You just need a little patience and you'll be rewarded with an almost year-round supply of this great crop. Turmeric belongs to the ginger family, and as such, growing turmeric is similar to growing ginger with a few differences. Once you get your turmeric rhizomes, check the color of the eyes. If they are orange or yellow, it means they are fresh. These can be planted right away, but it will take longer to sprout and has a tendency to rot if the weather is cool and the soil stays wet. To prevent this, first keep the rhizomes you intend to plant in a sunny area for a few weeks for the eyes to start greening, as you can see in your shot, before starting the next step. This next step involves filling an opaque bag with moistened river sand. Now place the turmeric rhizomes on the sand. You don't have to push it all the way down. Cover with more moistened river sand, ensuring that all the rhizomes are completely covered. Tie up the bag and keep it in a warm, dark place. After about 2 weeks, you can check on the bag to know if there are any sprouted rhizomes. As you can see, some or all of the rhizomes have sprouted and developed roots as well. This is a sign that it's time to plant them into their permanent container. It's best to plant the rhizomes when the sprouted shoots are about 2 inches tall, as they have the best chance of survival. I'm going to plant all the sprouted rhizomes and you will see what I mean shortly. To plant, you need a wide container with holes created at the bottom for drainage. The container shouldn't be too deep or too shallow. The ideal container should be at least 12 inches deep, but as you will see later, you can still get a decent yield with a container that is half as deep. Fill the container with well-drained soil mix. I normally use a soil mix made up of 60% garden soil, 20% river sand, 10% compost, and 10% charcoal powder. You can also use commercially available potting mix. After filling the container, create a hole deep enough to cover each rhizome and root without covering the sprouts. Space rhizomes about 6 to 12 inches apart and away from the sides of the container. This ensures that they have room for both lateral and vertical growth. Water thoroughly, especially if the soil is dry. Keep the plants in a partially shaded area, watering only when the soil surface becomes dry. After about 3 weeks, more leaves would have developed and turned completely green. Notice that the rhizome that had the tallest shoot have grown much bigger leaves without any blemishes on the leaves. However, all the other leaves from the shoot that were less than 2 inches tall have brown margins and are developing slowly. You have to remove weeds as and when necessary to avoid competition for nutrients. If the soil gets compact, you have to stir it occasionally to loosen it. Two months after transplanting, you can apply more poultry manure or compost. A few handfuls should be enough. Mix it into the top of the soil thoroughly and water it. Notice again that the rhizome which had the tallest shoot at planting has grown much bigger, whereas the others are trying to catch up. At about 4 months after transplanting, more shoots would have grown and the isolated plants would have turned into clusters. More big leaves have developed to increase the surface area for photosynthesis. The soil may be stirred before watering if it's too compact. This ensures easy penetration and even distribution of the water. Now would be a good time to give it the final dose of fertilizer by applying and mixing in a few handfuls of decomposed poultry manure or compost. If you want the plant to mature early, then don't give it any fertilizer later than 4 months after transplanting. Don't forget to water lightly after each fertilizer application. This ensures that the plant gets access to the fertilizer immediately. If you are enjoying this video, register your approval by smashing the like button and also share it so that more people will benefit from it. If you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification icon to receive updates on our new videos. Leave a comment or question and I'll be happy to get back. Your support is greatly appreciated. After about 9 months, the turmeric will be ready for harvest. You know the turmeric is mature when the leaves dry up and die down, just like ginger. Once the plant begins to dry up, you have to stop watering to prevent the rhizomes from sprouting and starting the cycle once again. To harvest, just pull up the whole clump. Notice the extensive and massive root network and the rhizomes hiding in between. You have to break the clump apart to access all the rhizomes. It looks like it's gonna be a big harvest. Although the container used was only 6 inches tall, we have still been able to get a decent yield. If you have more turmeric than you can eat, you can share with your neighbors or dry some to turn into turmeric powder or both.
Unlike many other crops, ginger is not grown from seed but rather from a piece of the rhizome, sometimes referred to as the ginger root. But you will see later that the root is very different from the rhizome, which is basically an underground stem. Start by selecting the right ginger rhizomes for planting. Look out for ones that have intact buds or ones that show signs of sprouting. Once you have the right rhizomes, you can plant them in the soil right away, but I prefer to sprout my rhizome before planting. This gets them to a faster start and an early harvest. I do this by placing the rhizomes in an opaque plastic bag. I moisten it lightly, tie it up and keep it on the kitchen counter for about a week. You can also leave the rhizome on the counter without covering it, but it may take longer to sprout and rhizomes will begin to shrivel up. After about a week, the most active bud would have sprouted and will be ready to plant in its permanent spot. This step can be started at any time if you live in a tropical climate, because of course ginger is a tropical plant. But if you live in a temperate climate, you can start it early in spring since it can be done indoors. To plant, you need a container that is wide rather than deep, since ginger rhizomes grow horizontally. The container should have holes at the bottom to allow for drainage and be filled with loose, well-draining, rich soil. I use garden soil, but you can also use commercially available potting mix. Water the soil thoroughly and allow excess water to drain out. Press the sprouted ginger rhizomes into the soil to about an inch deep, making sure that the sprouts are pointing up and out of the soil. You can space rhizomes about 6 inches apart. An 18-inch wide container can easily take 4 rhizomes. Cover with soil and water lightly. Keep the plant in partial shade for a couple of weeks. After about 2 weeks, the ginger shoots would have turned green and grown a little longer. New shoots could also begin to emerge. You can add a couple handfuls of poultry manure or compost and stir it in. You have to move it to a full sun location where it can receive about 5 hours of sunlight. Don't worry if your plant gets a lot of sunlight so long as you keep the soil moist, the plant will be fine. More about the sunlight requirements of ginger later. You have to remove the weeds as and when necessary to avoid competition for nutrients. If the soil gets too compact, you have to stir it a little bit to allow the rhizomes to expand. Don't put the hand fork too deeply, especially around the ginger shoot, in order not to injure the developing rhizomes. Stir in a few handfuls of poultry manure or compost every 2 months. Since some ginger rhizomes will grow upwards, doing this ensures that the rhizomes are not overly exposed. Make sure to water the plants after every fertilizer application. After about 7 months, you can start to harvest young ginger plants for use. You should first harvest those rhizomes that are at the side of the container, since these will have restricted growth. You can harvest by pulling at the shoots. If the soil is a bit dry, you have to water before harvesting. A knife will be handy for this operation. Wash the rhizome thoroughly after harvesting. These baby ginger rhizomes have a milder taste and don't have to be peeled before eating. The fresh leaves and stem can also be used to make ginger tea. Aside using it as food, I have another use for these baby ginger rhizomes, and you will see that shortly. After harvesting, you have to stir in more compost to provide nutrients for the developing rhizomes. As indicated earlier, I have another purpose for the baby gingers, and that is using them as planting materials so I can have a constant supply of ginger in the house. You can plant them in containers or directly in the ground as I have done. I'll provide an update on these at the end of this video. Ginger plants may produce flowers during production, but these don't have any significant impact on rhizome development. Don't worry if yours does or doesn't flower. You know the ginger rhizomes are ready to be harvested when the plants begin to dry up and die back. This can take between 8 to 10 months depending on variety and location. Watering the soil before harvesting can make it easy to pull out the whole clump. The real ginger roots will be at the bottom, but the edible rhizomes will be found close to the soil surface. You have to break up the soil to get to them. Once you isolate the rhizomes, you can cut off the shoot before washing them. You can also replant the young ones in another container or directly in the ground, as shown previously. After washing, leave the ginger to cure for about 2 to 3 days in a dry, airy place before storing. If you have more ginger than you can use, you can blend some of this, portion it and store it in the freezer. They can last up to about a year this way. Here are some important bonus tips to guarantee success. Number 1. The size of ginger rhizomes depend on the variety as well as soil nutrients. If you want very big ginger, start by selecting the right variety. But you need to provide supplemental nutrients to support full rhizome development. Number 2. Make sure to keep the soil moist. Too much water promotes rot, whereas too little causes the leaf to turn brown and die. Ginger normally prefers a warm, humid environment. If the soil dries quickly and you cannot keep up with watering, applying a layer of mulch can help retain moisture and control weeds. 3. Ginger varieties do not like prolonged exposure to bright sunlight. If you see many leaf margins drying out, then you may have to move the plants into a partially shaded area. A good location will be part of the garden that is shaded by a tree for about half of the day. Number 4. Be sure to select healthy rhizomes or roots for planting, since diseases of ginger plants can be spread through the rhizomes. Avoid rhizomes that have any signs of rot. As promised, this is how the ginger plants that were planted in the ground from the baby ginger look after 5 months. They will be ready for harvest after a couple months to continue the cycle. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button to show your approval. Thanks for watching.